He is Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson. And he either just came out of a banking meeting or he just came from the General Assembly.
Or a funeral. I mean, it could have been that as well.
It could be both, General Assembly and funeral. Jack, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And you're right, just came off the Senate floor. So we just had a great floor session. So
how are things going? How's our wallets?
So we're good. You're still the lowest tax state in America per capita, least indebted state per capita. I have to remind you of this, it seems like every time I come on. But no, Tennessee is still the best fiscally managed state in America. We're going to keep it that way. This year's been interesting because we had the special session and then we pivoted right back into regular session. So it's unusual, but we're underway and we're doing the people's business.
It's almost as if the powers that be designed it this way. Typically in a General Assembly, some of the bigger issues you kind of build up to those issues.
Yeah, and procrastinate. They get pushed to the
you
end.
kind of get pushed them away because you know that once that issue gets taken up, it's going to take all the oxygen out of the room in both the House and the Senate. And in this year, I don't know. I'm assuming it came from the governor ultimately, but it was decided that the best course of action was to go ahead and dedicate a special session to the biggest elephant in the room, the Education Freedom Act. And that passed, and that's ready to get going next fall. And I'm assuming that all of that is happening as we speak.
That's right. The governor called a special session, and there needs to be, we call them extraordinary sessions. I mean, that's the actual kind of legal term we use, and they should be. And I think these met that bar, the three big issues that we dealt with, the school choice. The department does need time to get that in place and all the mechanisms in place so that it can be administered for the coming school year. Obviously, the disaster relief for Upper East Tennessee was time sensitive. And then the immigration stuff we did with the Trump administration, they're not wasting any time. So we want to make sure that Tennessee is fully prepared to cooperate with them.
And over the last year or two, I just want to ask you generally about this. I know that you take exception with some of the assertions from some of the backbenchers that the General Assembly was not doing enough on the illegal immigration front. And your response to me was always a version of, and I think it's well said, there's only so much we can do.
That's right.
With Joe Biden in the White House. And as long as we have an administration that absolutely refuses to do their job, it's pretty impossible for us to do our job. What's your response now that we have a new administration in town and some new legislation from the General Assembly to address this?
Excitement that we're finally going to have a cooperative partner in the federal government in helping us deal with this. You're right. In 4 years of the Biden administration, now I was there under the first 4 years of the Trump administration, then I saw 4 years of the Biden administration, and now we get another 4 years of President Trump. And when you have a president that just lets the border be wide open, let people come in really without any obstacles at all and just freely come across the border, and then they distribute themselves out into the country, you as a state, the only thing you can really do is try to demagnetize your state, is just make sure they know when they come across that border and they're talking amongst their friends, where are you going to go? Well, whatever you do, don't go to Tennessee. That's kind of the message we're trying to send.
Opportunity's not there. Jobs aren't there.
That's exactly right. And I think we did that as effectively as possible. But where the rubber really meets the road, though, Matt, is when, especially those who not only have committed a crime by coming into our country illegally, but then once they're here, they commit additional crimes. Violent crimes in some cases, sex trafficking, murder, drug dealing. You could go on down the list. And so our law enforcement, brave men and women in law enforcement, encounter these people and they arrest them, charge them, depending on what happens. And if it's something that ordinarily they would be released back into society, the way the system's supposed to work is they call ICE. ICE comes and picks them up and they get deported. Well, that wasn't happening under the Biden administration. And so your hands are somewhat tied. Now we know that is going to happen. And so states like Tennessee that are ready to pounce on this and be very, very fully cooperative partners with the Trump administration, we have an opportunity to really get, starting with the most violent and then working from there, get these folks out of our communities.
There's another step that the legislature is taking as well. And you kind of do this knowing that you're getting us into the court system. And that is challenging whether or not it is an obligation of the state of Tennessee to publicly or to spend public taxpayer dollars educating children of illegal aliens. Or, I mean, one would assume that they come with their parents illegally as well. Just speak to that and knowing that this is eventually going to get to the courts, right?
Absolutely. So there was a United States Supreme Court decision, 1982. It's called Plyler v. Doe. That was the name of the court case. And it came out of Texas, actually. And because Texas passed a law, and I think I have this right, more or less, at a high level, is said that, look, we will provide an education to these kids who are in the country illegally, but they need to pay tuition. They're not in the country legally. And so if we're going to allow these kids into our schools, then we're going to charge the parents tuition. That got struck down by the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court in 1982 said, no, you have to provide a free public education to these children, regardless of their legal immigration status. Well, we believe that the dynamics have changed, the situation has changed. We certainly have a far different, differently comprised Supreme Court right now, and we believe that should be revisited by the Supreme Court. So my good friend, Senator Bo Watson from Hamilton County, has filed legislation that says districts may charge tuition for children that are in the country illegally. We expect that to be challenged and will probably be enjoined, but we're hoping it will make its way up through the court system and ultimately hopefully get the United States Supreme Court to revisit that decision.
The state of Tennessee's had a couple of victories, not just, from the General Assembly passing legislation, but from the careful consideration of the Attorney General as he navigated these through the court system. One, I guess it's commonly referred to as the drag show bill. You and I talked a lot about this, but recently that was ruled to be constitutional. I think the Supreme Court declined to take the case, which sent it back to the appellate court, which had already ruled in favor of the state of Tennessee.
Exactly, yeah. Senate Bill 3 from 2023 that I sponsored. Your listeners will recall there was a rash of videos that were circulating of what people were dubbing family-friendly drag shows or family-friendly entertainment. And then you'd see the video, and this is anything but family-friendly. Sexually explicit, nudity, simulating sex acts, things like this in public parks, in schools, in restaurants that are open to the public. And so there was a huge outcry, rightfully so. And so I sponsored that legislation that said, if you're going to have that type of entertainment, it has to be in adult-only venues, has to be age-restricted. We were sued over that. And actually at the federal district court level, the law passed was enjoined, but the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed that lower court decision and allowed our law to go into effect, said that it was constitutional. The plaintiffs appealed to the United States Supreme Court, and just last week we got word from the Attorney General that the Supreme Court had declined to take it up, effectively affirming the Sixth Circuit opinion. So a huge victory for Tennessee and Tennessee families.
Well, and what a completely the mainstream media is guilty of, and I say the mainstream media, I mean, of course, we were talking as loudly as we possibly could about the real meat and potatoes of the bill. The national media completely mischaracterized this legislation, suggesting that the state of Tennessee was banning adult-oriented activity for adults. Of course you weren't doing that. Nope. I mean, you and I can sit here and agree or disagree with what certain adults do in private arenas. But all this was an ability for parents to be assured that their children were not going to be exposed to adult-themed, obscene activity in their child's presence. That's it.
If I saw it once, I saw it 100 times. And in fact, I did so many interviews on that legislation, and I would tell the producer or the reporter or whoever is interviewing me saying, now, let me be very clear. This does not ban drag shows, and it doesn't. You can have drag shows. You can still have drag shows in public places. You just can't do things that are sexually explicit. Mm-hmm. We did not ban a man dressing in wearing a dress and putting on makeup and dancing or whatever. You just can't do things that are sexually explicit. And then almost 100% of the time, the headline would come out, Tennessee bans drag shows.
It occurs to me, and I've said this in the past, why in the world these performers desire to do this so much in front of 8-year-olds? You never hear about these drag shows going off at nursing homes, right? You never hear about these types of performances at the senior living facility. It's just an observation. I just don't understand why they gravitate toward the children so much. I don't know. If I knew any better, I would think that there was something behind that. But anyway, there was another Supreme Court victory too, the transgender victory that happened this last couple of months, I believe, affirming Tennessee's ability to restrict transgender surgeries for underage children.
So that law is in effect right now. Now that one the Supreme Court did take up, and we had oral arguments on it.
Okay, so I guess it's not been decided. Yeah.
We don't have the decision, but your point is accurate, and that is that our law is in effect. It was partially enjoined at the district court level, but again, the Sixth Circuit affirmed reversed that injunction and allowed our law to go into force. So it is in effect right now. Kids are being protected from that in Tennessee. The plaintiffs appealed to the United States Supreme Court, and we await that decision, but we are hopeful and cautiously optimistic that they will allow the appellate court decision.
You know, I don't know that some of these issues have gotten over to the Senate side, so forgive me if they've not, but we've talked to several House members, to include our good friend Representative Scott Cepicky, about some education legislation. I'm just curious where you are on a few of these things.
Sure.
Scott is big. You know, he's made the case for additional recess in our school systems. I love it. I mean, I love the fabric of the concept that kids need outlets. They need play. They need that social interaction. That is a part of a healthy learning environment. You're in agreement with this?
100%. And in fact, it's one of those cases of the pendulum swinging too far one way to the other. And I think well-intentioned, but advocates in the education field became so focused on reading and literacy. And these are incredibly important things. I'm not dismissing that. But they just kept nibbling away at recess and PE and physical activity time. And especially for those young kids, that there's some school districts right now that are giving, you know, a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old 15 minutes of physical activity during the course of a 6.5-hour school day or whatever it is. That's crazy. So we do need to get back. The legislation as filed would require 60 minutes. That might get negotiated down a little bit, but I'm 100% support of that. And
then the other education piece that comes to mind is the cell phone bill.
Yep.
Which there are school systems in the state of Tennessee that already have limited access to cell phones during the school day. I saw an article, I believe, in the Tennessean today or yesterday that indicated that, you know, the students have adapted. They didn't like it. I don't expect them to like it at first, but they've adapted. Sure. Generally speaking, are you in favor of this as well?
I am. And the only thing I would point out, and to be clear, I'm going to vote for the legislation, and I think that there's still some negotiating going on there. But I do want your listeners to know districts can already do that. You said districts are already doing it. So this will be a state mandate forcing districts to do something they can already do. I think it's important enough that yes, I would vote for it. But again, for folks that are calling us, why aren't you calling your school board members and asking them to adopt that policy? Because they could already do that.
I appreciate that approach. I mean, because I like a senator or a representative that is loath to take over what is ultimately a local responsibility. And, you know, only when that need seems to be really, really pressing should we.
Well, I asked, it wasn't someone from Williams County. It's a good friend, but it's a school board member from another county. And we were having this conversation and they were lobbying me on the bill that I should support. I said, well, why don't you do it now? And they say, well, because we get pushback from parents. I said,
they want to blame you guys.
I said, you just want us to be the bad guys.
Yeah,
and to this person's credit, they said, yes, we do. We want you to have statewide policy.
But you know what? And that goes to the point that if there are enough of those school boards around the state that have that position, then fine. You guys be the bad guy.
Yeah, no, and again, I'm fully supportive of the bill. It probably no harm in it being a statewide policy, but I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Andy is a bad person. You don't have the super text lineup, do you, Weber?
I do not.
Andy just said that I don't think you look a single thing like Andy said you look.
Oh no. Well, it's probably
he's watching on Super Talk TV.
Okay.
He said that you look like Philip Drummond. Do you know who Philip Drummond is?
I do.
You are much more handsome fellow than Philip Drummond. I'm just saying.
I've been called worse. I've been told I look like a lot worse. So
what you talking about, Andy?
I won't take that as an insult.
You see what I did there? What you talking about, Andy? You see what I did there? Jack is down there in Williamson County, and it's my understanding, I did not have a lot of knowledge about this. Thank you to Dan Mandis for bringing this to my attention, that there is a big meeting that will involve a pretty big vote tomorrow. Just tell me about this. This is an organizational organizational meeting for Williamson County Republicans.
That's right. Pursuant to the state Republican Party bylaws, if a county has an organized county-level Republican Party, and most counties do, not all, but most counties do, they have to hold a reorganization convention every 2 years, and it's usually in the spring, about this time of the year, where they elect their new officers. So you elect a chairman, first vice chairman, second vice chairman, secretary, treasurer, so forth. And these are the people who administer and run your local county party, and it's a very important election. And in Williams County, we've got two slates of candidates, and there's a lot of interest in the convention. I think people have some very strong feelings about their future leadership, and so that's all going to take place tomorrow night at the Cool Springs Marriott.
It's my understanding, and I don't know how much you know about this or are aware of it. I know you're involved in Williamson County politics, so you probably are aware of it, that there's a segment of the leadership that wants to change the way Williamson County residents vote in their primaries.
That's correct. Yeah. The county party has the authority to either call for or not call for a primary for your local races. This would be your county mayor, your sheriff, your county commission, county trustee, county clerk, all those county level offices. And of course, historically, for as far back as I can remember, you have primaries. You have a Democratic primary, you have a Republican primary that's held in May. That's when people go and vote for who they want to be the Republican nominee for county mayor or sheriff. And then their general election, where the Democrat runs against the Republican, is in August. And there is a slate, one of the slates of candidates that's running in Williamson County wants to do away with these primaries and select Republican nominees via caucus, which is much like this convention is simply an event that would be held on a Tuesday night or a Saturday morning. And so if you want to have a voice in who your Republican nominee is, you have to go to this particular event. And if your schedule doesn't permit or you've got something else going on, you're out of luck. You don't get to have a voice. So I very much support us maintaining our primary system, and the other slate of candidates is strongly advocating that we maintain people's right to vote and select their nominees.
So if you go to a caucus system, you have to be present in person.
Yes, absolutely. So if you're in the military, you're out of luck. If you're a police officer, and that happens to be when your shift is,
there's no absentee caucusing.
No,
I would suppose
you have to show up, be there in person. And
what's the reason?
So the argument
that they want to switch.
The argument is made that they want to make sure that there are not Democrats crossing over and voting in primaries, and that is something. That's why I've long supported party registration. And I think we are moving in that direction in Tennessee, meaning you have to actually be a registered Republican in order to vote in a primary. Some people refer to it as closing primaries. I prefer to use the terminology of party registration. Many states have this. Tennessee is what we refer to as an open primary state.
Let me tell you, I would be in favor of, whatever you want to call it, party registration or closed primaries, and I would also no longer vote in primaries. I would not register as a Republican. I mean, I'm just being honest.
Yeah,
I would not register as a Republican because I'm not a Republican, and I wouldn't think that it was right. So while I would recognize that would, I understand these are party functions, and if I have that much concern about it, then I can create a third party, grow that third party, and present ourselves as an alternative
and have your own nominee,
and present ourselves as a Republican and a Democrat.
That's exactly right. And at the end of the day, Republicans should be the ones choosing their nominee. And I'll throw in another complicating factor. If there's someone who's been a lifelong Democrat and they finally get so fed up with Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, AOC, whoever, and they say, I'm just tired of this. I don't want to be a Democrat anymore. I'm going to switch and become a Republican. Well, hallelujah. We should welcome that, and we should welcome these people into our party. I'm just saying you should have that revelation more than the day before a primary. You should have to go and register and attest that you are, in fact, a Republican.
Like a 30-day, 60-day window.
30 days, 60 days, something like that. Not make it something that's difficult to do, but you should have to register in order to vote. And to me, that solves the problem, and I hope we get there in Tennessee.
That feels like the common sense solution to the issue, not a caucus system. That there's just a lot more peril with that. Jack, we're going to leave it there. We'll continue the discussion on the other side of the news, but thank you for making us aware. And anybody that's going to the Williamson County thing, y'all vote early and then get your butts out to National Palace. There you go.
And see you get your haircut.
And see me get my haircut. There you go. There's Jack Johnson.